Hello again. We are now in the GitLab Do Coffee chat, and today I have Raymond with me to dive into Ruby, GitLab code, product features, trying to address some ideas, some contributions. And I think Raymond has a concrete idea what we want to do in the next hour. But I think we don't have a solution yet. So I think it will be a fun session, right?
Yeah, definitely. And this is always going to be a bit of fun when I start poking around with front-endy stuff, and hopefully GitLab Duo can help us figure out some of the magic runes, because front-end stuff is always interesting. I'm supposedly a full-stack programmer, but if it doesn't say back-end, I can't usually figure it out. But well, I can usually figure it out, but it might just take a little bit longer.
And the thing is, we can also try different prompts in GitLab Duo chat to see if we can get help and don't need to open up our browser search and 20 different tabs. Yeah, and just getting a feel of using different AI powered features throughout the development process. I think, yeah, you need to start sharing your screen.
Okay.
And
So
from there, we can discuss what we want to do today.
yeah, cool. So that should be up now.
Yeah, this is the GDK, right?
Yeah, so this is GDK, but I also have it available in my sort of .com profile. So
Okay.
really
And
the problem space is in your user settings under your profile. We currently have the ability to add in several um, social
social.
networks. Now, if we wanted to add any additional social networks into this list is just going to keep getting longer and longer, and a user that may not use all of those social networks will have to sort of navigate this list of potential um, empty settings. Whereas if we were to change this around to be something along the lines of one of those sort of web forms, and yeah, here's where my front end knowledge goes funny, so I might be saying the wrong words, but the concept is there. But have one of those web forms that says sort of like add add social network, click from a drop down which ones are supported, tick that, and then it adds it in, and you can fill it in. So that way a user only then is displayed the ones that they've actually configured rather than having them all configured or all showing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I mean, I'm not a web developer either, but I understand from many years ago, self HTML and things like that. You probably don't want to have an endless list of forms and things to insert, but rather look at different ways to have an overlay or have a drop down or something similar. And
Yeah,
I forgot to highlight or forgot to explain GDK in the context of the video. If you haven't heard it before, means GitLab Development Kit, and is kind of the framework how you can set up a development version of GitLab locally, um, and provides you with the ability you implement a fix or you implement a patch, and then you can test it on your instance. And so basically a development environment.
exactly. So yeah, this is a fully working copy of GitLab that is running on my machine. Um, and one of the other nice things with GDK is that it comes fully seeded with some test projects and other test data, so you don't have to go and worry about setting all of those up. If you need to make a change with something to do with merge requests, you just open up merge requests, and there's a number of merge requests already sort of there waiting for you to work on, so you don't have to go and create dummy data for you to then be able to figure things out. So there's yeah, like I said, there's existing sort of demo dummy projects there for you to interact with that are all pre-populated with issues and merge requests and other things that you can work with. So you can really spend your time focusing on the change that you want to make, rather than how do I make a change,
It's
or at
great.
least, yeah.
I usually think of, now I've implemented the feature, how do I test it? And like, someone already created the test data, which is great.
Yeah, exactly that. And one of the other great things with GDK is if you try to do this on .com, for instance, it doesn't work as easily. So if you were to just sort of inspect the page on .com or on your own self-hosted instance, you just see a bunch of form fields here. But if I do the same sort of inspect on my GDK page, you can see that it's very conveniently filled in a number of comments, which helps us actually find the specific files that are actually being used to display the form.
So
So
it's
that
kind of
helps us navigate.
a debug mode for GitLab, if you will.
Very much so, yeah. Which is great, because that kind of quite quickly drops us into at least hopefully being able to figure out where we want to start. So in this case, I'm actually going to be looking for a file called app_views profiles show.html.haml. So if
The reason I was asking was, many years ago I tried to contribute to GitLab, and I didn't have any GDK, but I was guessing how the source code would work, and then waiting for the CI/CD pipelines to finish. And then someone said, "Can you write tests for that?" And I was like, I don't have a test setup. I need to think how CI/CD works. And luckily, someone else was faster fixing my merge request. But then I figured, if I have the GitLab Development Kit installed and ready, either on my local machine or on a virtual machine in the cloud somewhere, this is much faster development rather than staring at CI/CD pipelines.
Oh, exactly. And one of the other benefits of having GDK running is that the tests all can be run directly yourself. And I mean, we can actually do that as an example here. But if I just opened up that file which we found, which was app views,
can you zoom in like once?
I can try, certainly.
Increase the screen size or the font size a little bit.
Is that any better?
I think that's better.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have a very large screen, and as much as my IDE has been made smaller for sharing, it's yeah, I understand that it can be a little bit yeah, hard to
No worries.
read.
I'm used to present in talks and do recordings, and often it's really like I cannot really read it, so the audience cannot read it either. So I'd rather say something.
No, good call. So here we can actually find. So we've opened up that file that we saw in the
show. Okay,
in the browser.
Show.
Yes, app views profiles show.html.haml. It's a HAML file. So we use as you may or may not know, yeah, GitLab is a Ruby on Rails application, and HAML is one of the HTML templating languages that can be used when you're using Rails, as it's and it's the one that we tend to use. And often what you might find on some pages, if you are sort of digging around in the GitLab code, is that we fire off a Vue.js front-end component for a specific component. However, what we can see here is that this page hasn't been converted to VueJS, which is probably a good potential change for something in the future. How that would work, I wouldn't necessarily know, but yeah, that is something that could be done. But here we've got basically that page that we had loaded in a in HAML format. And here you can see that we've actually got our form groups here. There's our Mastodon form field. There's our website URL form field. There's our Discord form entry and the Twitter one. So the Discord one, you can actually see we've got a little bit more validation directly in the form, whereas a lot of these other form fields are not doing too much validation in the front end side of things. But yeah, ideally,
this
this change.
markup renders the front end kind of loads that, and this renders the page, or this describes how to render the page and how to, for example, have a form validator hook somewhere and saying you're not allowed to add an email address without an @ sign or something like that, right?
Yes. So in this particular case, so the Discord one is doing some validation directly in the front end, and that's doing it. We've just got some URLs linked out here. That's popped in the. This is where my screen sharing doesn't work for switching between shared windows. On Zoom, where have you gone?
Zoom has a feature which is advanced sharing. So if you're not sharing a window, but you can share advanced and then select a specific area of your desktop, because I have now a 49-inch and I kind of need to share just one area where I have overlaid either the browser, Visual Studio Code, terminal, and things like that. Maybe that works for you.
Yeah, I'm just actually just going to move things onto a different desktop, and then we can do just that. Cool. So let's pop Zoom in the corner, and let's. Right, bear with me while I just rearrange all of that.
I was reading about HAML, which means HTML abstraction markup language.
Yep.
And there's ERB, I've seen that as well.
So ERB, I think, is one of the sort of standard templating languages that we use, or that can be used. And then HAML is just a lot easier to read in my mind, because you're pretty much writing a slightly abstracted version of HTML, so you don't have a lot of all the tag mess, but at the same time you can then execute Ruby pieces within the code. How's that share? Is that reading a little bit more easily?
Yeah, that's okay, I would say. Cool. Probably in the browser, if you zoom in the inspector at the bottom, I think this is hard to read. I don't know if you can press Command plus a little bit. Yeah, that's a little better.
Let's do the same with the browser. Cool. So okay. Right. So this is the form currently right now, and as I mentioned, we've also got the ability to run tests. I wonder if there is a test here. But what's sitting behind this in this particular case is we have a user details model, which is our Ruby model for user details. Now in here you can see we've got a number of fields, like Discord, LinkedIn, Mastodon, etc. Mastodon has a validation attached to it. So there is validation happening on Mastodon, but that's not happening directly in the front end. So that validation will only ever trigger if you go and try to add something that doesn't fit in. So let's try to update that. If we try to update that, it's going to come back with a with an error.
it needs a user action which posts or sends a post request to the form, and then the error is being triggered in the backend, and the user gets that as a front-end error.
Exactly that. Whereas there is also Discord validation happening at the backend side of things, but then as you can see here, there is also specific validation happening at the front end. And that would be, so there you can see that one is actually showing there. And that's in that particular case, it makes sense because there is a very strict length on that field, whereas something like Mastodon, you could certainly put some sort of JavaScript validator in place there, but I don't know remotely enough JavaScript to even begin to think about how we would go about doing that. So, right. Now you mentioned you had a bit of an idea as to how we can sort of get started using Duo Chat here.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure if to use Duo Chat, but it would be interesting whether are code suggestions available for HAML? I don't know.
Let's see. Where
it does something.
Something's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So but next to line number 100, you see the GitLab Duo icon. So like the Tanuki with the, I think it's a globe.
Yes.
So,
well, there we go. There's some code suggestions straight away.
okay,
So yeah, so
okay,
it is.
so we could take advantage of that. I would also be interested, for example, in explaining specific source code.
Yeah.
Before we think about like how to refactor that into a dropdown, which we can try. But for example, mark that as exactly and /explain could be a way to get an explanation if I don't understand HAML. Oh, it's amazing. We can actually test the streaming in Visual Studio Code, which has been added this week or last week. So you get the responses a little faster rather than waiting for the entire response.
Cool. Good thing I updated my my workflow extension before we started this chat.
I would have probably asked you during the session at some point. What you can also do to always keep Duo Chat in Visual Studio Code, you can drag and drop the icon from GitLab Duo on the right pane. So on the further right side, and yeah, then you have it open all the time, and you
cool.
see the file browser. I had been proposing as a feedback to maybe open GitLab Duo Chat always on the right-hand side, but some users might not be used to that. And
Yeah.
if it's closed, I think on the right top corner you can switch the different panes and so on. Because sometimes it's not open when I restart Visual Studio Code, so I actually need to kind of re-enable the pane again. Yeah, exactly this button. But this can be a helpful way to always have Duo Chat inside and ask a question when needed.
Now, if I close that, it just does that. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. And if I wanted to anchor it back there, I can just pop it back there if I wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a preference for everyone, obviously, but my preference is like keep the file tree and git commit and whatnot on the left-hand side. Middle focus is code, and right-hand side is anything that is helpful, because it reminds me of Visual Studio many years ago, where you also had like the lookup in the MSDN library or specific other things somewhere on the side, because it's helpful to have something which is in the window, and you don't need to do a context switch into a web search or specific other window to look something up.
Yeah.
Okay. What
Cool.
does it say?
I usually switch off the file browser when once I've got my files open, unless I'm poking around for a file, especially in the GitLab repository. It can be there's a lot of files, so it's just sometimes easier to do that.
Okay. So I think the explanation makes sense. It's a lot to unpack, but it's correct how it's rendered and how they are styled, and there's also translation going on in the background for different language files, I think, which are stored as .po, I think, somewhere.
Yes, so in this case where you've got a string like that, there will be a translatable version of that. So if you are running GitLab in a different language, you will possibly not be seeing this particular line in your
Yeah.
in your window. So so that's your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, and if I use, I don't know about the existing translations, but I imagine there should be probably German. So I would be saying, hey, here's like maybe it's
Well, let's refresh this page and see. Yeah.
Bad LinkedIn profile now. Yeah, it's correct.
And if you are running GitLab in a different language and you run across a translation that doesn't seem to work or doesn't look quite right,
yeah, I
please follow this help translate link, because yeah, our translations, just as our code itself, our translations are open source too. So please feel free, if you are a native speaker of a non-English language, to contribute additional translations.
a good call, because I just spotted a bug with Profileinstellungen, which says Profil einstellen, which is not correct. And
Great.
I could also help translate Discord, because the Discord text is not translated. But I'll take a note for later.
I will be looking out for those.
Now I have too many things. I will try to convince friends who also speak German. But it's a great way to contribute. It's not just like writing code and understanding everything. It's more like putting emphasis on what makes sense in the context and what has been translated by some machine learning or some like automation, which might be accurate, but if it doesn't understand the context yet, it can be a little tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great highlight there, is that contributions are anything that helps the project. Doesn't have to be code. So translations are absolutely valid as contributions. Creating an issue is a valid contribution. You know, sometimes just the simple act of identifying, hey, it would be better if the German translation says something else, but I'm not quite comfortable enough with German to correct it myself. But I can note that the Discord translation is missing. Even just the act of actually creating that issue is a great contribution, because all that does is it highlights it to somebody else who actually might be looking for something to do. That, oh, you know what? I don't normally run GitLab in German, but I know German, and I can go and fix that translation issue, and there we go, and we end up with a better product for everyone. So yeah, it's.
I'm specifically thinking about customer environments or enterprise environments where you need to have a tool in the native language, which often is like a requirement because English is not the first language, or it's like harder to understand. And I see that myself with certain English terms also in the GitLab UI, I'm like, I don't know exactly what this means. Opening Google Translate, I say, okay, this is the term. So yeah, if you see something and you kind of want to use the German version of GitLab, please contribute or let anyone know that something is broken in the translation, so that you can continue use GitLab in your favorite language.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like I say, so contributions aren't just code. So issues, translations, even sometimes validating an issue, you know what, this issue was logged 2 years ago. The particular thing that this issue relates to isn't even a problem anymore because the code paths behind have changed or something else. Even just popping onto an issue and saying, you know what, as of GitLab 16.7, this is no longer an issue. Or this is, this is no longer a problem. Even something as seemingly trivial as that is still valid contribution because that's helps the community at large. So it's definitely something that is helpful to the project.
And like circling back, what we're trying to do here with explaining the source code, for example, if your company has access to GitLab Duo or GitLab Duo Pro in the subscription, and you consider like changing the translations, or you want to implement a new feature and don't know how to get started, using GitLab Duo chat or code suggestions to explain the source code, to refactor the source code, to like look into that, can also be a helpful way to speed up contributions to GitLab. Just thinking out loud here.
Yeah. So, I mean, talking about refactor, off the top of your head, what are the other slash commands that chat?
You can, so explain is something I start using with when I don't understand the source code, whether it's already there or code suggestions generated a 50 line or 100 lines of source code block. Refactor works in the way of you select the source code as well, and then okay, that's probably we need to wait for the markdown rendering. Is a way to instruct do a chat to say I want to refactor that source code. Often it's helpful to provide more context, so you can write /refactor into functions as a full string, or into object-oriented code, or into maybe a dropdown. So this was one of my ideas, to give better instructions saying I want to refactor that in a specific way, and then I can hopefully copy paste the code, for example. Here it says to create a function.
So this is creating a function, which is great, but we can't run the function natively in our HAML file. So where would I put that function is a very good question.
We could refine it, because I think one of the main things it does try with refactor is to create a function so it's reusable. Maybe write, or maybe select the source code, which is already selected, and write again /refactor in Duo chat, but followed by refactor into refactor into a HAML dropdown. Let's try that.
So with the slash?
Yeah, /refactor into a HAML dropdown. I don't know if it works, but I want to try it. It's really like this code task. So if you look it up in the Duo chat documentation, it's called code task. You can refine the prompt so that this string into a HAML dropdown is added into the prompt when it's sent to the large language model or to the API in the background, and it allows you to refine what you actually want to have. You can also say use a specific source code language framework or use a specific programming pattern or something like that.
Cool. Well, that looks pretty much spot on. So let's give that a try. No, wrong place to paste. I want to paste that there.
And for me, then again, it's also the reason why to go back to /explain, also because I can either continue the conversation like in the chat window and ask more specifics how a dropdown in HAML actually works or what HAML is and so on, and DuoChat might be able to help. But if I get a long code snippet, which I then can insert and copy paste, before and I think sometimes the formatting might be a little off, so you need to kind of fix that. It's helpful to understand what it does. So I again have embedded /explain or the explain code task into my workflows already, just to ensure that I understand what's going on there. I think you can also refine the prompt with explain and say, explain how the algorithm works, or explain why we're using static variables in there. Static variables in C++, not in Ruby.
Cool. So yeah, it's pretty much reads that okay now. Right, we've fixed the indent. That looks like it's indenting the same way. So what happens if I save this and I refresh this page? And this is fundamentally why you use GDK, is because when you're doing stuff, you can actually just refresh the page and see what's happened. Now there's an undefined method happening there, which is fine.
This is great, because if a suggestion works for the first time, it's usually like, okay, that's amazing. But in my experience, you learn a lot more when you get a suggestion from AI, and then you need to refine it and actually inspect the source code. And then it's sort of I would say a code review, if you will, to verify it works and I have understood how it works.
Yeah.
So I see AI as a way to get more efficient, and obviously like generate source code blocks, which I'm not interested in like maintaining, or which are boring, like boilerplate code. But it can also be a way to refine algorithms to write better code, but still have the knowledge of that source code, and also ensure that the knowledge is not lost. And when for example, you touch the source code next month, and nobody knows what's going on, it was just a huge merge request with 2 million lines, which also doesn't make much sense. But there's a way to use, for example, explain for specific things, and also to understand why a change was actually being made, which is a later point, which is a merge request summary, or using AI during merge request reviews. But we're not there yet. We need to fix the problem now. Did you see where the icon is being used? Is there a way to...
The error here is talking about the error happening on line 10, or actually line 102 up there. Now all I've done is, let me just...
I mean, my hacking approach is Command F. I think it's Command F and then search for icon in the diff.
Yeah, I just want to take out I just want to keep a copy of the original code. All right, so it's moaning about line 102. Okay, so it's where it's using, it's decided that there's an icon called chevron down, which then not necessarily is. Let's go and have a look at the GitLab UI page.
Yeah, either the icon method doesn't exist or the icon itself.
So the icon should exist, but we need to find the list of actual icons which are available.
And since it's kind of using only the context which we provided, like the selected portions of the source code, it might have tried to guess.
Yeah, okay, so chevron down is actually one of our icons, and it looks like that. So
Okay.
that's probably not incorrect, but then it's probably
what
balking on the fact that it doesn't know what icon means.
if we have like a specific error message that we can copy paste into Duo chat, this is also something I tried doing. Try to do like undefined, yeah, just for and copy paste that into Duo chat. Like, please explain this error, and copy paste the error message, and then wait what happens. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes you are required to refine the context as well. Like, please explain this error. Copy paste. Or if it says I'm having too little context, could also be a way of refining the prompt and say I'm getting this error after refactoring HAML code in the GitLab context. Please explain what's going on without specifying the receiver object.
Thanks. So it's giving us pretty much a slightly Englishified version of the error there, which is basically saying like, yeah, well, it doesn't really know what icon method I'm trying to call. Now, have a look at the existing form group, the pieces that we replaced, and going back to, well, my GDK page isn't working, so just going back here, we don't actually have the icons of these social networks on this page.
We don't have the scope here.
So we're not currently using that icon. However, when you go and display your page, your actual user page, then we do actually render the icons. So let's just have a look at this guy, which is...
Okay, so you're using the debugging route of saying, this is a working example, and I was guessing maybe an include, an import or something is missing. So we have the scope of the icon object somehow.
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay.
So let's find a page that is working with icons and figure out how it's doing that. And then we can take
profile basic info _ profile basic.
Maybe this is where we need the browser. There we go. So this one says if Skype is present, render that, link to that. You see, and it doesn't use icon, it uses sprite icon.
Okay.
So if we just change, we go back to our code here, and instead of using icon, we use sprite icon.
But I think it needs some itext, right? But yeah, let's try that if it changes.
Boom. Oh. It's not rendering our chevron down, but
does something.
We do have something
which is
not
great
necessarily
yet.
Working yet, but we have managed to refactor at least those three into, it's giving us a drop down, just not doing anything when you select that. So
it's
cool.
Start.
That's a great start.
we can you can create a branch now, commit that as like the first dropdown, refactored by GitLab Duo or something as a git commit message. And then we try to maybe add functionality to that dropdown in the remaining like 30 minutes something.
So DB structure gets messed around with branches and everything on the GitLab repo. I just take whatever's master because we haven't been making DB changes here. So
Git add. Yeah, it's always a good way to first add everything to staging and then just commit what has been in Git staging. Refactor profile or user profile user profile settings, social profiles into dropdown using GitLab Duo. No,
so this is where
you need to sign off. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the a good git commit message, it is also something similar to 80 characters or 120 max.
So the GitLab project will enforce a limit on your first line, which is your subject. And that's why I wanted to actually drop into Vim here to do this because my Vim will start highlighting. If I write this message too long, it should start. See, it's highlighted after that point in a different color.
Yeah, I
So
think I used to have like a red bar or something like that in previous projects.
yeah.
I need to
So
configure that with GitLab as well.
I've got this sort of line down here, which is at so many characters. I think it's at 105 odd characters or something, which is a recommendation from our code styles. That stuff shouldn't go too far to the right of that. As you can see, it's very much a loose recommendation, but it's always just good to bear that in mind. And if your line length is getting a little bit longer than that, maybe it's a good idea to break stuff into a multi-line command or something.
Yeah, it's similar to the documentation where I always forget that I should split up my long multi-line comments into dedicated new lines, which makes them easier to format and change in the long term. Because I'm used to writing blog posts where it doesn't matter how long the content block is. But yeah, it's good to keep these things in mind because if you need to change them during merge request review, this takes more time.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to remove as much of those friction points as you can.
Yeah,
Those lines.
especially because I know that like our docs team is doing an amazing job, and I don't want to waste their time, and not mine either.
Yeah. So now the question is,
Okay.
there's my chevron icon down. It's supposed to be there. It's supposed to be rendering.
But maybe it's not, it doesn't exist as sprite, maybe? I don't know what sprite exactly means.
So
Or
it may not be
maybe it's
coming as a
white.
sprite. So very good call. So if we just yes, I think you're exactly right. So currently we have Now, can
Maybe
we find
there's
in here?
another, it's not sprite underscore icon, but blah bloop underscore icon. Maybe there's another
Yes,
rendering call which could be available.
exactly. So sprite icons are the ones that we currently use for the social networks themselves, etc.
Maybe there's a down icon somewhere. Down.
And I don't think Chevron is in this list, or Chevron. Chevron down is one of these lists, is on this list. So it is a sprite icon. So why can't we use it is a good question.
Maybe it's rendering as white and not black.
Yes, that's also very possible. So let's go and see.
So I would be interested in the CSS. Yeah, exactly there. And fill current color. What does current color mean? Fill black. Oh, maybe it's no. Oh, is it after the dropdown or inside the dropdown? But
Maybe it's just this drop down isn't wide enough. How do I make this thing wider?
Yeah, you can hack it in the browser. Yeah. I don't know, 300.
So it is rendering fine.
It's just maybe you need to have like a dynamic width of the dropdown somehow. How does the commit email above do it? Because I think it's using a static. This is a static. This is aligned to the page, I think. But maybe let's look into the HAML, because I think the HAML uses the dedicated style.
Okay, so render if exists profile email settings. So that's actually a separate file, which is fine. There's our profile email settings.
Maybe this makes sense at a later point to refactor again into a subpage.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's our drop down. So it could be tied into that. These are some of these sort of built-in styles.
I don't know, CSS style labels, something like that.
Yes. So we've got our
it's using a button default label, like drop-down menu toggle, GitLab button default. This is a form input. Okay. Form select. Options for select.
email do not show on profile. Where does it say do not show on profile?
Line 22.
Okay. So that's a form select.
It's a dedicated form which has which uses an array of public verified emails and then selected. Okay.
So instead, this is just using a drop down. So let's change that to.
Maybe we need to kind of change the duo chat question and say select this and refactor the dropdown into a form.
Yeah, that's.
Or restore the previous code and no, let's move from there and say that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, both strategies work to either start new, like check out the previous Git version, or continue like dropdown using form selection. What I also love to do is copy pasting the exact function names when I know them. So I'm not leaning entirely on the AI, but when I know what I exactly want, like how the function should be called or how specific variable names should go, I explicitly add that to the prompt and say refactor that using that function name, for example.
Yeah.
Which often leads to better results rather than saying give me something, and that something always causes extra work.
Yeah. I think that's a great strategy when you have an idea of what the things are called when you're playing around in the front end world.
Yeah, and it's also in the backend world. I've been using that strategy with Rust and C++ recently. Also because I'm poking around the best do a chat prompts, or generally like prompts for a blog post and for the documentation. And it's always good to practice while learning. Social
Undefined
media.
method social media, because I think, yeah, we're now,
F object social media, that's a case selector.
yes. Mine's about line 99, which is this one. So actually,
Okay, but the object doesn't have social media as an attribute. Or how does this get rendered into it?
so that was the other version of the page, which does this drop down menu. So let's restore that, because I did like that solution.
You can also just do git checkout -f, since we persisted it previously.
Git checkout -f.
Or git restore that specific file. Checkout -f is like a forced checkout to the current committed state. It's a relatively invasive operation, but oftentimes it's like, oh, I want to start fresh, throw everything away.
Well, that's cool. It's something I don't use a lot. And even, when you mentioned it would be a good time to do a git commit, I was like, but I don't really have a complete thing. So I tend to probably not commit as atomically. And that's where it shows that it's helpful to do atomic commits, especially if you're playing around with something and want to try something in a slightly different format.
Yeah, I mean, the git commit message doesn't have to be perfect. My history is also oftentimes WIP 1, 2, 3 with some context, just to ensure that I have different states to play around with.
Yeah.
Because I had a situation many years ago where I lost like 2 days of work because I didn't commit anything. And it was a great reminder to say, even if it doesn't work, it's the current state. And if I decide, hey, the dropdown is working, I can ask a friend, a teammate, whoever is the expert in that, because we could potentially start a draft merge request, which is public, and then say, I have no idea how to implement the rest, but maybe someone else could step in and help out.
Yeah. And you can always squash things anyway. So
Yeah, this
okay.
needs a little more knowledge how to squash and rebase. But since on when you merge a merge request in GitLab, you can set to auto squash, which is also a great way to have just one commit in the main history instead of 20 different drafts.
Yeah, at the same time, if you are making a change in the GitLab project, DangerBot, which is our bot that will check for a number of stylistic things, will moan if you have too many commits in a given merge request. So if you are using very atomic commits, it's great for your for your own process, but once you start moving into a review, it's maybe a good idea to sort of squash some of those into slightly less atomic random things, and maybe just take your 10 or 15 commits and squash them down into 3 or 4 ones that have sort of specific steps in them. So one for your tests, one for something else.
Yeah, I
It's
think that's a
just
good strategy. I was just like more thinking of like if you're learning a new technology, if you want to start contributing, don't give up and persist smaller changes, and
yeah,
then there might be a success moment saying, okay, this now works, and I'm squashing the recent 5 commits into just one, which makes it
yeah,
easier to review in that case.
absolutely. And
On
yeah,
the other side,
if you look at some of my personal projects, there's a git commit message saying fix ABC, and then the next commit message says try number 2 to fix ABC, and then commit number 3 starts probably using expletives in the commit messages, because I'm now starting to get frustrated because it should have worked the first time, and now I'm on the 3rd or 4th commit. But that's also something that does happen over time.
and what I also like to do is sometimes you have front-end changes, back-end changes, documentation tests and whatnot. Start writing them in individual merge requests, even if they don't get merged, but you get to see the learning history and the things that worked or didn't work. And if I'm not satisfied with the merge request in the current state, I can always close it and just move the changes into a new merge request, which then is ready for review, for example.
Yeah,
But to like persist the learning history can be helpful for future team members, for onboarding, for knowing, for getting to know the source code better. But it really depends on the development, not lifestyle, but the documented developer styles, style guidelines, how the teams are working together, and so on. And yeah, how can we change that? So this is now the refactored version again.
yes. So now I want to get it to iterate on its previous selection, so that instead of using a button, I want it to use a select.
If we use a select instead of a button. Oh,
It's got itself a little bit confused, and though it's dark, it'll, once rendering kicks in, it'll be
yeah,
less rendery. But yeah, it's put the div in an HTML tag. So this line up here that starts with the dot renders directly here with our sort of div. And yeah, so in this case, it's now given us a div in an HTML tag, but that's fine. It's the
yeah, I think it refers to, because you said fix this div.
yes,
So it thinks you explicitly want to have like an HTML div,
yeah,
div, not the other one.
yes.
Um, could
Okay,
also
so
like to write a different prompt is like fix this. And again, I'm thinking of do a chat as a way of using low context communication at GitLab. Provide as much context as needed so it can provide the best answers. So it refers to the previous history in the chat, and it also knows the open file. But if you're not satisfied with what you get as a response from a single line or just refactor, think about the problem statement, what you want to have, and ask for specific examples, or maybe different examples how to approach the problem. Because the more it knows, the better it could potentially help you.
yeah. Interestingly enough, now it's just thrown a HTML div at us again, but it's going to give us much the same code as it gave us before, which is fine. Maybe means it's worth checking that out. So it
And
looks like,
I
so
have
it looks,
some feedback for this for streaming. So the Markdown blocks probably should use a different rendering style while being streamed.
yeah,
But we can add that into the public feedback issue because chat is right now it's in beta, so we can still address. Oh yeah, and we could also give feedback on the content. Say it's helpful, but Markdown styling could be improved. But I will also share the recording and some thoughts in the feedback issue this week. And you can do so too. So
yeah.
can we fix the problem? What does it render again?
So let's just have a look. So we've got that saved, so I can replace that block. I'm obviously going to replace the div tags too. Just like that. Oh,
Yeah, but one way to refine the prompt could also be say use HAML and avoid raw HTML.
yeah. Still not very happy with this because it's got this undefined method on line 100. So 100, we're doing this select.
Yes, and maybe it's so the label is networks with an S, and this is network. Maybe an S
We can
does
try.
the trick. No. Okay. Oh, yeah. Under social network fields. Undefined method. So F is, in this case, the user object or the user profile.
So that's not there's no context on that based on that previous refactoring. I think it's looking for this specific item here.
Yes. The problem is we don't have any database query or attributes on the user object, which is called social networks.
Yeah.
So we only have like the raw data, and now we are trying to we would need to have like a wrapper of the attributes and say we are stashing Twitter and X.
Well, it's supposed to be picking those up from, sorry, hit the wrong button there. It should be
network.
Picking these from this list here. It should be basically saying, okay, we'll create that
Or
based on this list.
what does f.select do? Dumb question.
So it's going to give us no such thing as a dumb question. So that should be a form select. What does select mean in HTML?
Oh, it's an HTML tag. Okay. Okay, this should render an HTML select box or dropdown with the different options, but for some reason it doesn't understand that.
Yeah, see now my
Oh yeah.
my instinct is to go to Google, but let's have a look here.
Oh, it's great. It's in this case it understands HAML. I tried to convince it, I think on the weekend, to explain IPv6 network errors with Ruby gems. And at some point, I think GitLab Duo Chat gave up on me. Still have
Nobody
some.
understands IPv6.
No, my network is a little complicated, but I will get there. It's not directly related to Ruby or Ruby gems, but it's still, I want to use Duo Chat as a knowledge base kind of and avoid Googling, or not Googling, using a browser search all the time. But it's also a good learning curve to say it has limitations, and we won't be able, or at some point we might be able to solve everything using AI. But it can be helpful where saying, instead of like understanding the algorithm or understanding, for example, regular expressions, let's just ask Duo Chat, because Duo Chat can generate regular expressions for IPv6 if you ask for it. And
Yeah.
this is something where 10 different Stack Overflow answers exist, and it's great to have that, but I don't want to research it. I want to have a suggestion which works, hopefully, out of the box. But in this case, I'm a little lost with HAML and errors. Could also be a feedback for improving the error messaging, because the stack trace is...
Well, that's that error messaging.
I mean, it's great to have that highlighted in the UI, but I don't understand it.
Yeah, this is basically internal Rails. This is the renderer in Rails actually breaking down because it doesn't understand what we're trying to do. But I think it's simply just a case of this is giving us utter garbage, because yeah, it's actually looking for it's looking for a method called social network on the user details, or on the user itself.
Maybe form selector f.select is modified in the context of GitLab, so it tries to look up a function, or maybe it's using an overloaded object function somehow. So maybe the user object automatically tries to call the function if it doesn't have the attribute, or maybe it's just a Ruby on Rails feature, I think. So if something doesn't exist in that scope, it tries to call a function.
There we go. So this is
Just me
form options
guessing now.
helper. This is Ruby on Rails.
Okay. So you need to render out an array of things.
Yeah, which is kind of what we're passing to it, but it's
maybe the colon social network Does it think it's an attribute, right?
So it thinks it's an attribute of the user class.
Which doesn't exist because we don't have that.
Yeah.
Okay, this sort of explains the error message, because we need to use like a static variable which is only local to provide or to render the form. But I think in the Rails case here, it's the form only can render the attributes of an existing user profile object. So we probably would either want to change the user object structure.
Hold on a sec.
And
Let's
in a way that we kind of wrap and say this is the user, this is social networks, and it's an array. No, it's an array. It's it's an array of dictionaries or hashes where specific attributes exist.
So
how would
I tried to create a local variable with that array in the context, and then select this, and now it's expanding that and trying to find a method called that on the user object.
Okay, maybe this is a requirement the way it's designed and built. Can we search where the user object is being defined and add social underscore network as an attribute to that user? I mean, the database will break because we don't have that field yet, but it would be interesting to see how the social profiles are being used for a user profile class, and then think about how to add that. Maybe we can use code suggestions to add that. Okay.
Now we have a social network attribute on our user class. So let's get rid of that. Let's make that the symbol again.
Yeah, as a matter of time, probably we can use code suggestions to write Ruby code. Not showing it right now.
Okay. So we've got something working now.
Okay, now we have social networks, but it's not the form we want to have. Okay. Why does it say include blank? Where does the include blank?
Hold on a second.
Include blank is the prefix.
Let's try that.
Okay.
There's our select chevron.
Yeah, we forgot something. We need to re-render the page and add the field where we want to add the social media networks.
Exactly that. So now we've made a drop down that gives us the ability to choose one of those, but it's not actually displaying those things. And there's a little bit of esoteric HTML.
No, I think the idea with the dropdown was not the best idea, I guess. Because selecting the dropdown and then having an input form means I can only select one thing. And maybe a different UX approach is needed. I'm kind of thinking of, you have like the first form where it says, I don't know, LinkedIn, and then you have a plus icon on the right, and it inlines the next field and the next field and the next field. Maybe there are different UX approaches for that specific thing.
Yeah, you almost need like this sort of
add more
add
extending
another field,
forms.
add another field. But it would be great to have a little bit of a live sort of sandbox to be able to play with that. Like I say, there's already similar UIs in various places around GitLab, so it's possibly just a case of figuring one of those out, and maybe we can revisit this with a delve into one of those, or in the meantime I can delve into one of those so we can come back and revisit this with a specific path forward.
I would love to come back to this because we invested a little over 1 hour now. Yeah, maybe do some research on what works best, but then come back unprepared kind of and continue figuring out how we can solve that problem.
Cool.
Maybe in a month or so, after Summit and other events.
Yeah, that sounds like that sounds good. Out of interest, I just noticed this when I was browsing through the file a little bit earlier, but it looks like somebody is already somewhat in the process of making the entire user profile view enabled, which is great. But that would mean that we need to switch on an edit user profile view feature flag for that user to get that. In which case, if you do that, then none of this HAML stuff will render because this is all sitting under an else there. So that's a feature flag gating for this. But
it's a great find. Maybe the feature flag exists in a month's time, or maybe not.
Well, the feature flag is there. I mean, I can hit the feature flag on my GDK for this user, but yeah.
For the strategy for the next session, we could either look into VueJS and help move this forward, provide feedback, or think about like how to solve that in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds good.
But yeah, thanks for all the thinking and showcasing today. I think I learned a lot myself. And also think in Ruby on Rails and think how attributes are being added and how this gets rendered. And often it's also good to say, I had this idea, we tried it out, and it doesn't work because we forgot something. And then you go back to the drawing table and say, okay, maybe there's a different solution, which we can try next time.
Yeah, definitely. That all sounds good.
That being said, thanks for your time. The recording will be uploaded as always on YouTube with all the additional resources we discussed today. Yeah, and looking forward to the next time, contributing to GitLab, learning Ruby on Rails, VueJS, using GitLab Duo and AI.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.